Hello and welcome to a very special Delboy video. Yes, during my prepping of the blog last week, an alert came up to me, and a friend of my channel, Down the Rabbit Hole, a message came up saying that I would be interested in watching this video. And when I clicked on the alert, it was a whole special about me, and I was totally taken aback by it. Now, I've known Down the Rabbit Hole for a number of years. We first sort of like got introduced by just chatting in a chat engine while being on a mutual friend's site, Mainmeister, which a number of my friends of my channel will know very, very well. And what happened is that Down the Rabbit Hole had been watching my blogs and realised that he hadn't asked me many questions, but he also noticed that I was a bit down the last couple of weeks because, I don't know, I like to do shout outs, and I'm also one of these people that don't buy a pint for someone to get a pint back. But sometimes if you're in a very low ebb, a very dark place, a low point of view, sometimes you can get quite frustrated where you see other people being mentioned but you don't get mentioned yourself. And Down the Rabbit Hole, bless him, took that to heart and decided he was going to do a whole special on me. So basically, I watched this whole video and I couldn't believe, first of all, that he would do something like this for me. I was so happy and, invigorated, to do something, that I watched his video and sort of like answered his questions very quickly into a dictaphone, which were literally 3 or 4 words that came to mind. And then decided to come back and do a special, because I thought, what was the best way of answering these questions? Should I do the questions in a special myself? Should I answer them just in my blog? Should I just give him a text comment that says, these are my answers, thanks very much, mate, see you in the next one? And I thought, no, it deserves a special. I don't know quite where I'm going to put it in my collection, because I like to bandy things with names a little bit. But that's neither here nor there. I thought the best way to do this is I want you guys to watch the video with me, so you can see my reaction as I watch it. This will only be the second time of me watching it, and we're going to pause at each question, and you're going to hear my answer. And if some of those answers might require an object, because remember, I did watch it once and I recorded into a dictaphone, so I know sort of like if I need an object or not. You're going to see me turn that into a topic or a discussion. So with much, further ado, I think we'll watch the video and get to the first question. So I'm going to hand this all over now to my mate Down the Rabbit Hole, and we're going to listen along, and I'll see you at the end of question 1.
Oh man, we're pretty high up, Spidey. Yikes. Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I wanted to do kind of a shout out and a series of questions. I've done these before, and this time it's for a fella who is a big Spider-Man fan, right? So, I've been following along, sort of Alan Stewart's crowd who do, the streaming stuff and all that kind of thing. There's one fella on there, Delboy. He actually does his own channel, Delboy3k1. Here's his channel, and I'll put a link down below. He has been really good at kind of the community thing, the kind of keeping people involved, and he does a weekly blog, and he does some retro gaming. And what I really like about Del is he is my generation of gamer. Like, he's from the 70s era gaming crowd. He understands what it was like for those first arcade machines to show up, and then the home PC experience in the UK. He's a British YouTuber, and he kind of broke my heart in the last couple of his vlogs, because he's saying he likes to give shout outs for people who have made questions and asked him things, made comments, etc. And he did say a couple of weeks ago, I like doing the shout outs. Unfortunately, nobody ever shouts out me. So I'm doing so now. Go and check out Delboy3k1 on YouTube if you want to have a more, what should I call, a more seasoned, long-term gaming perspective on stuff. He does do a lot of modern games as well. Kind of anything that's been remade, revamped, re-envisioned, he does those as well. And it's a lot of interesting stuff. And I thought to myself, okay, to do this correctly, me and Spidey, I'm going to wear my pseudo Spider-Man outfit and have on the joystick that was big in the UK back in the 80s for Del. I want to ask a bunch of questions, Del, because I've done this before for Alan Stewart, I've done this for Swifto, Weebob, a variety of various people in the community. I've asked them questions as a standalone video. I apologize I've never actually asked you questions on your vlog, but I figure everybody's doing that, and I felt the questions people were asking you were totally good, but I thought to myself, I'm going to compile a bunch and make it as a video and ask Del 9 or 10 questions here, and just as you can in your vlog or whatever, give me answers. And if anybody else wants to chime in on these, this is not specific to Del. If any of you others have opinions, questions, remarks, please feel free. But some of these I've asked Alan and Swifto and Weebob as well, but some of these are also very specific to what Delboy's shtick is. He loves Spider-Man, loves Marvel movies. He also is into kind of physical media collections, Blu-rays and that kind of thing. And so I've got some questions, and they are right here, Del. So let's start off with number 1. What is your favorite Spider-Man game? Both recent, let's say the last 10 years or so, and also retro, previous to 10 years from now. What has been your favorite Spider-Man games in the modern era and in the old days?
So sorry about these little breaks, but I have to turn the microphone back on and all sorts of stuff. So as you can see, I'm taken aback because this is a lovely thing that Down the Rabbit Hole has done. And his very first question is a very loaded topic. And it's like, of all the Spider-Man games that have been out, what is your favourite Spider-Man game from, say, the last 10 years? And then going further back to the very first Spider-Man game. And he's quite right. I'm a very old fart. Thanks for pointing that out to me down the rabbit hole. I did have the very first Spider-Man game that I think is known as the very first Spider-Man game, and that would be the Atari 2600 or Atari VCS system. I think it was by Parker Brothers, and it was back then a great game. I was wowed by it. I was a young game player. Even then, though, things were moving forward quite fast with technology, and there were much better games with better graphics and less convoluted and frustrating game mechanics to play the game. And this particular one was a doozy of a game. You had to defuse the bombs on the skyscraper while avoiding people that at the windows as you were climbing your way up this building. And then, of course, the Green Goblin, if you've ever known any of the Spider-Man villains, was right at the top, and you had to defuse the bomb. A very, very difficult game. It's had nothing but possibly really bad press since its release, because it does look simplistic, and it is incredibly hard, and to be quite honest, to a lot of people it would be very uninteresting, and it would make you ask all those questions like, well, if Spider-Man could climb up a wall, why is he climbing up his web all the way through this? Why can't the web stick to the windows? Why is it that when it doesn't hit the building's concrete, he falls to his death? Why is he falling to his death anyway? He's a spider, etc., etc. All of those sort of questions. But for me, looking at it as a young lad, didn't matter. I had Spider-Man in my hands. I've still got the game, by the way, just because I'm a collector. Because I don't have the Atari VCS anymore. And I had an immense time with it. Um, Now, I could mention all of the games going through this, but I won't. I'll just mention ones that sort of like come to my mind right now. Right now. The second Spider-Man game I ever played was a text adventure or text graphic adventure by Scott Adams called Quest Probe Spider-Man. Quest Probe was a series. It was going to be 12 or 13 series long. It was going to be a total Marvel license, and it would involve all of your favourite heroes. The first one that came out was the Hulk. The second one was Spider-Man. I believe the third one was two characters, Ben Grimm and the Human Torch, or most people would know it as Thing and the Human Torch. And the fourth one wasn't completed, but it would have involved the X-Men. There is a version out there that you can download. It is 25% complete, but but Adventureland and Scott Adams' own company went bust. But the thing I like about the idea of a text adventure is that you could do anything you want. It was write what you want him to do, like climb up, shoot web, punch face, all sorts of stuff like that. And the idea of the game was to solve the riddle and escape from the chief examiner. That's right, the chief examiner was going around capturing Marvel heroes to get some of their life energy for an end battle that would have happened at the end of the series. The comic book series was also going to be 12 long. It ended up being 5 or 6 comics, and I believe it ended in a special somewhere. I have got it somewhere. It ended up in an X-Men comic at the end, I think. But that brings back memories. And I had 2 versions of that. I had the disc version and the tape version, because the disc version had better enhanced graphics. You can still play that game under emulation, and you can download it as a text adventure using Scott Adams' own little parser, what they call a parser. And you can play all of his old text adventures using this parser that just loads into a web browser, I think. So if I can remember all of this, I'll try and put it in the description. But the next one that comes to mind, and there will be ones that I've missed in between, will be the Genesis or Mega Drive version of a Spider-Man game called Spider-Man vs. Kingpin. This is the one where the graphics suddenly now do look a little bit like your comic book character or cartoon that you've ever seen. The sounds weren't too bad. You recognised all of the villains. There was a story behind it. Mary Jane's been captured, and you've got to defeat all the heroes and get Mary Jane back. There's bombs as well in buildings that you need to deactivate. And the antagonist is called Kingpin, which is a well-known villain in Spider-Man. And that's why it was called Spider-Man vs. Kingpin. Now, I love the game, but I didn't have it for too long. Because of course I sold my consoles quite quickly, and I moved to the next console, and that was an exclusive to the Sega's own console. So basically there were a number of other games that I played in between the next ones, which were SNES related. So there was Maximum Carnage and Spider-Man and X-Men versus X Arcade, I think. Those sort of games, and those tended to be, I don't know, a bit lackluster, mazy, platformy, shoot 'em up type things. The nice thing is that you could play with your friends with them, and other than playing an enhanced version of Spider-Man vs. Kingpin, because it came out on CD, so it had some cutscenes and the graphics had changed, we then move up the ladder quite a bit, and we get to Dreamcasts and PlayStation 1s, and there was a game that was just called Spider-Man, and this was an eye-opener because it was now all in 3D. Spider-Man was now swinging across buildings, holding up bank people. It still wasn't quite Spider-Man in feel, but it had Stanley narrating. This was before the movie came out, so this is before all of the free roaming games came out. But it was the closest thing I thought to how Spider-Man should feel and play as a game. When you jumped onto the ceiling, you would see it from looking down at the character, as if I was walking on the ceiling. I would see the underside of my shoes, and the whole ceiling would become transparent so that you could, move around and then drop down from the ceiling onto the enemy and all sorts of stuff. And it had, of course, all our recognized villains, Scorpion, etc. So that was a fantastic game, and I had that on the Dreamcast rather than the PlayStation 1, and had immense enjoyment with that. And then, of course, we've got the modern stuff. So we've got the film franchise versions of games, which were mostly like Grand Theft Auto, free roaming, go wherever you want in the game type things, and with a linked-in story somewhere. So of the best of those, I think Spider-Man 2 was probably the best free roaming of those games, until much later on, and in the last 4 years we've had 2 Spider-Man games. One which was about 3 or 4 years ago is absolutely fantastic. It has a couple of what they call DLCs where you can continue the adventure, but from a look and feel, there's nothing that comes really close in regards to all the old games. This feels physics related. If you pull too far to the left, you will be stringing yourself along, flying between these buildings at such high speeds. So that was a brilliant game. And then the last one that came out is about Miles Morales on the PS5. And although I should be turning around and saying that's the best one, I'm going to go for the one that is before that, which is universally known as Spider-Man Remastered. And you can see a picture, I think, behind down the rabbit hole here. And I would say that's probably quintessentially the best Spider-Man game I've ever played. And what a great question. Really enjoyed answering that one. So I'm going to mute my microphone and shut up for a minute, and we're going to come across the second question. So just bear with me while I set all this up, and we'll come to the second question.
Question 2. Were Marvel Comics as full of ads in the UK back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, as they are here? Now, in North America, as a kid, I grew up, I started off being interested in Batman, but that got away from me because it wasn't like on TV. Then I got into Spider-Man, but what I found was a real problem with Marvel here is every story would span multiple issues, and you would turn about 2 pages and there'd be a full page ad. Turn another page, some more Spider-Man, and then there's another full page ad. And this was, for a kid who didn't have a lot of money, for me to be buying a comic book every week and getting 6 pages of story and 6 pages of ads was a little not what I liked. And I'm curious if Marvel in the UK had a similar ad structure or was a little more free breathing. A really good comparison that I have is when I lived in the UK, I really got into 2000 AD, the comic strip, because it came out on a weekly basis for like 35p, and there were almost no ads at all. There was maybe something on the back page, maybe one center sheet, and that was it. And they were typically promoting like a convention or something. They weren't really like bubblegum ads and jeans ads like there were in the North American comics. And I was really blown away. I was like, wow, here is this comic strip that comes out every week, like a full, 8, 12 page, 20 page, I can't remember, comic book with lots of really great characters, and there are almost no ads, and that blew my mind. And I was just like, yeah, I'm on board the UK comic scene. North American comic scene, at least Marvel and I think DC at the time, no thank you. So, Del, I'm curious, back in, say, the 70s and 80s, were Spider-Man and the Hulk peppered full of ads because they were here in North America? Or was it a lot more streamlined? Because I really found 2000 AD quite an eye-opener.
Yes, yes. So now this is a huge topic, and I don't know whether I should go really in depth on this or not. But actually, down the rabbit hole knows more about this than he's letting on, because he's sort of like giving it away. I wouldn't say the word streamlined is the best, but he mentioned that he was over in Britain. He'd bought a couple of UK comics, as they're known, which are weeklies. To us lads, that's different to you in the States, where your comics are generally monthly, or in the newspapers called funnies. Um, and so he wanted to know a little bit about the differences. But of course, to other people that will be watching this that not really into comics, probably don't understand anything that I'm talking about. So let's go back to basics. And this time I think we're going to try using another camera and talk our way through this. So I've got my portable little camera here, look. And we're going to start off with what Down the Rabbit Hole was talking about. Now this is a very old comic, a beaten up one that I don't really care about. So it doesn't really matter if I pull the pages out. But this is very difficult to do with one hand. There we go. So we've got an American comic, okay, and as you can see, the first time you open it up, you've got an advert for something to do with G.I. Joe on the left, and we've got some stories. The stories go on, we're not too bad, we're about 3 or so pages in, 4, and oh look, there we are, there's an advert, and it's about the Nintendo Entertainment System's joystick. Then we've got another bit of a story, and oh, now we're getting a few more adverts, and we're going, yeah, it's starting to get a bit disjointed, this. I really just want to take in the comic a little bit. And we move forward, and now we've got a double page spread, and it's about CDs and records, and all in America. And it actually is a 3-page spread, so it goes over to the next page. As we keep moving along, we're seeing a bit more of the story. We're going good guns now. Look, we've got three pages of uninterrupted, and then oh dear, another 4-page ad. And I think we can get the idea of what Down the Rabbit Hole was talking about. It's advert crazy, but they do seem to be in the guise of the style of the comic, all aimed at kids. Probably not aimed so much at females and more males, because it's all arcade game and paraphernalia and so forth in regards to what you wear and so and that. And then of course you've got some adverts about where you can get your comics, and about some chocolates, and then a TSR board game. So yeah, very advert orientated. That annoyed me, I have to turn around and say. These are what modern comics look like now. Bit more glossier. I'm not going to open these up, but this is just something that I wanted to explain about my blog. You'll see up here it says this is issue 1, but it's also legacy number. I don't know if I can get that in shot, but it's 895, and it's what they call a variant edition. If you look at these, that's number 1, variant edition, exactly the same number, look, just a different cover. And then we've got, oh, look, another different cover, and if I look down here, it's, oh, look, number 1 again, same number, 895, and there we are, look, there's another one, Amazing Spider-Man. Got a gorgeous cover there. Looks absolutely wonderful. And, oh, it's issue 1 and legacy number 895. And then the last one we've got here is Spider-Man. But it looks like it's got Mary Jane in there. And it looks like it's issue 1 and, oh, yeah, 895 again. Variant edition. Why am I showing you all of that? Because this is what I think ruins comics a little bit. Whenever they reboot something or whenever they're restarting something, they put a slapper number 1 on it, and then they publish the comic, which is, by the way, exactly the same insides all the way through every single one of those comics, and the only difference is the cover. So you're paying for sort of like a poster, you know, like oh, I like that cover, I like that cover. But if you're a collector and they say there are 12 variant covers, then you've got to buy it 12 times. That's what a collector does. Now, I'm not a collector of games. I'm not even really a collector of films, because if you want to think about it, how many films are out there, I'd never be able to collect them all. By the time that I have collected them all, we'll be on 3 new formats. We'll probably be on holographic films by the time I've got all the 4K films. So what you have to ask yourself is that I'm a collector of really one thing, and that's my comic book hero, Spider-Man. I try and stay on top of it as much as I can, and I buy the cheapest stuff first, and if I've got a little bit more extra money, my place where I get my comics from will phone me up and they'll say, do you want this special edition that's there, but it's a little bit more expensive than the others? This one is £7, not £3 like the standard edition. And I'll say yes or no to it, and hopefully they don't go beyond £7. But unfortunately, you'll tend to find that there are variant editions which are 1 in every 25 or 1 in every 50 or 1 in every 100, which means that the person who just phoned me up, the comic store, that asks me, do I want this variant edition, and it's 1 issue per 100 that the comic store has to buy. In other words, the comic store has to order in 100 comics to get this 1 issue. Then basically the price goes up, and some of these prices can go into hundreds of pounds. So that's where I draw the line. That's where I'll go, I'm sorry, I can't go any further. And I just wanted to point out the legacy numbering, because the other thing is, although a number 1 will sell more than any other comic, they also like the fact that a comic is still got its old numbering system. So in this particular instance, if you look at it, it's rather crafty. This is issue 895. In 5 more issues' time, the legacy number is number 900. And what do? There you go. You've got another magic number, number 900. And basically, you're going to be buying variant issues over and over and over again. But that's just to get that little moan out the way, because, to be quite honest, it annoys me. We're now going to answer the question for Down the Rabbit Hole. So, here's my Spider-Man comics from back in the day, and these are the UK ones, so that you can see, look, 5p, Spider-Man Comic Weekly. Where is the number? There it is. This one is number 3, week ending March 3rd, 1973. And you can see that it's more magazine side. It's much bigger than the American version. There you go. You can see magazine. The paper is pulp paper, so basically worse quality. And as we move through this, you'll see that it's not colour. It is black and white with 1 colour extra, red. And they chose red because Spider-Man is partly got a red costume, so it makes it easier to point out who Spider-Man is. But you can see this is a very old issue from Steve Ditko. At the moment we've got all story, so a bit more story. You can see it's turning black and white now, so that saves money on the comic. Unfortunately, there is a cutout on this. But that one turns full colour on those 2 pages there, and then you've got a slight colour and a black and white. So far, though, we've had one advert. That was the one that we just passed by. And it's all Marvel's own adverts. So there's join their fan club. The next issue of the Hulk is going to be out. And there's going to be a gift for you when you buy issue 4 next week. As you can see, all Marvel there. As we keep going, we've got story. We're about 15 pages in now. Story. Not much going on here other than reading a lovely story and looking at the lovely art. Again, sorry, doing this with one hand. Story. 21 panels now. Story. Keep going. Story. And, oh, now this is something that doesn't happen very much in American comics. You've now got another story by a totally different character, and this time it's the Mighty Four. So we've got page 1 of the story. Bit more story going on again. We're up to page 27 now. Sorry, it's much harder to turn the pages on this older type paper. I think I've just missed a page there. Yep, story. Up to page 31 now. Then we've got a letters page, which is common in American comics. And then we've got a poster advert. So we've got one advert so far for something other than Marvel's own. Then we've got story. And the last page in full colour. This is what's going to happen next week. Well, I counted one advert. So Kevin is quite right. There are less adverts in the UK ones, and that is really quite common. It was actually like that, and there were adverts for ice lollies, sweets in particular, but other than that it would all be posters and that sort of stuff. So we're moving forward now to number 47, and I just want to show that the comic is still at the same 5p and has now moved up to 1974, just to show you that Marvel continue to bring this out weekly. Now remember, this is every week, and in the States it was every month. And so far, Marvel, for all those other weeks, have given you a book-length thriller every week. So we were going through 4 monthly comic books in 4 weeks. You see what I mean? Where that would be 4 months over in the States. So we keep moving forward. Story. Notice it's now all black and white. There is no colour at all. No reds. Nothing. This saves Marvel on the paper and the printing. So we keep moving forwards. We're up to page 9 now. Sorry about turning the pages over. These are very old. Yep. Story. Lovely art this time by John Romita Senior. Story. And next issue. So basically I didn't see one advert for the whole of Spider-Man story, so I wasn't interrupted at all. Then there's an advert for next week's this week's issues if you wanted to buy something other than Spider-Man, which was The Mighty World of Marvel, starring the Hulk and the Avengers. Notice that the Hulk was 5p and the Avengers is 6p. I'm going to explain that in a moment. Okay. Then you got a letters page with an advert for stamps. Brilliant. That's going to invigorate me. Then 4 is still in this book. So we're up to page 26. Keep going with the 4 story, and then it says next issue. Now what that basically means is that there are less pages. So we've come to page 32. The other one had 40 pages. So what they've done is they've cut back 4 by a number of pages, and his story that used to then appear in the America as one comic book is now split into 3 sections. So you'd have to buy 3 issues of Spider-Man to get 1 full story completed. Okay, now the reason for the price hike, if you remember, that was issue 47. This one's issue 48. The comic had gone to gloss, So the issue now is all full gloss. Um, it's still got trademark 1974 Marvel Comics down the side there, and you can see that this one is January 12th, 1974. So they moved into a new era of having glossy covers, but the insides are still black and white. There's going to be very little change over to tell you here. The page numbering is going to be the same. There's going to be 32 pages, I believe. Yep, 32. And nothing really changed then until Marvel saw another way of putting in more issues of heroes other than Spider-Man in their story, still keeping the same page number, and still having, if at all possible, the full Spider-Man story. So we went to what they call landscape format. So there is a normal format comic, which is higher, and then you've got it landscape. And if you now open this up, it's going to be very hard for me to get the camera shot in, but you now have 4 pages for what you're reading of this comic. So you can see each page there are 2 pages now per one. The artwork shrinks down, but you can still read that very well. It's still John Romita Sr. here, by the way. We've moved to 1976 and the comic has gone up to 9p. But this format was around for about a year and a half, because what Marvel didn't think about was the stress that it put on the staples. If you look there, look, the staples are really, really pushed to their limit, nearly going to fall out of the book. So really you have to be very careful with these ones. So we're moving forward. Look, so far it's all story, not much advertising going on, just like Down the Rabbit Hole said. And then we get to page 9. Oh, I'm missing a page, that's why. And it's still story, and the end. So we got 11 pages, but because there's 2 on a page, that's 22 pages. That's exactly a full-sized story that you'd get in the States, and you bought it in one weekly comic. And then you've still got all the other pages to put other comic books in as well. So although in black and white, you're now getting another book. So we've got a little thing here telling you about a competition that's coming up, and then we move on to Doctor Strange. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, a double gatefold, 10, 11. Now notice that would be 2 pages in an American comic, and you'd have a crease line going down there where the gatefold would be. So basically, what they've done here is they've printed it for the first time with no crease lines, just as if the artist is drawing it on a comic board. So that again is new, that you wouldn't get in the States. And then because that's near the middle of the comic, you've got a poster. And if I draw back, you could open that, take that double page out, and you could have that on the wall, a comic book poster of Warlock. Now you could colour that in, do whatever you want with it, but every week they gave you a poster done by UK artists of American heroes. That was very good, I thought to myself. You'll find that if you're trying to collect these comics, by the way, that those gatefolds are gone. These are my own comics, so not too bad. And now we've got another story. Look, this time starring the Thing, Ben Grimm. And like I say, it's story. But notice there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages before it says come back next week. So that is not a full story. And then you've got Iron Man. There's an advert for another weekly comic called Dracula Lives, which was the horror line of Marvel, which came out weekly. And we've got an Iron Man story. So we've got so far 2 pages of Iron Man. Let me see if I can get the page. 3, 4, 5, 6. Don't think there's many more, because I think you'll find it's going to say continued next week. Just trying to get the pages. Yeah, 27. So still haven't opened the page correctly, but in between there, if I can just get the page open, I do apologise for this. There we go. If I've got the page open, you'll see that the story ends there, and it says repeat to be continued next week. So you've got about 6 pages of a 22-page comic there, then a letters page for the time, and then we start again with the Mighty Four. This one with Jack Kirby, so it's quite an old one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again, and to be continued. So again, 6 pages of a 22, and then there is a cash-in for sea monkeys that you can buy by collecting stamps, an advert for an Airfix kit, and then an advert for next week where you're going to get a poster. So what I'm trying to say here is you have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate comics in America, with one being the full story and the other one broken up into 6 pages each for you to then watch week by week. So those stories that you see there would take 3 weeks to complete, and this one would be complete each week. Just going to end it up now. These are the issues that you'd get in 1984, so we're spanning forward now 8 years. And the only thing that's really changed is the price and the fact that you've now got some colour pages. It's still black and white, still using horrible paper, but every couple of pages it turns back to colour. You've still got a mail page, lots of colour again. An area that tells you where you to get back issues from, which is Marvel's own advert. A thing about a villain. Then you got the Avengers comic, which is partly colour, part black and white. And then it turns into a spotlight for what's going on during the month. And then a small Hulk comic, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages deep, so that's going to take 3 weeks. An advert for you to buy Spider-Man watches, which is funny. Look at that, £16.95, including postage and packaging. For both of them, £9.95 each. LCD, quartz LCD. Whoa! And when you get towards the end of the page, it's the end of the story in colour. And then where you can get your annuals from. Now, annuals were hardback editions. They cost £3.25 in this particular year. There was Spider-Man, Hulk, Return of the Jedi, Manimal, which was a terrible TV program, Wham, a pop band, Knight Rider, a TV program, Roland's Rat Superstar, oh my god, SAS, don't know what that was, The Fall Guy, remember that, Culture Club, and Fraggle Rock. Wow, who can forget Fraggle Rock? They were done by a company called Grand Dreams. Again, those would have been reprints of Marvel comics. And then to say how sad I am, this is issue 645. Spider-Man was now on its way out. It's now 1985. The comic is 27 pence. Spider-Man now is for kids. It's for the younger audience. It's to help people read. All you're getting here is little puzzles like spot the same Spider-Man. There are 2 in this particular picture. Point out which 2 are the same. Then you've got a jokey comic like the Beano and the Dandy. Nothing to do with superheroes. And then you've got a easy to read comic aimed at children of about 5 years old, which were published in the States, but they were called Spidey Super Stories, and they were printed for the General Electric Company. Now, I'm mentioning that for Down the Rabbit Hole because he'll know what I'm talking about, because he's of a certain age like me. Then there's a competition Another small jokey comic there. Stop the press because Indiana Jones is joining Spider-Man next week. And then a comic about Fraggle Rock, which was a TV series over here in the UK and in the States. The Dukes of Hazzard, another TV show turned into a comic. Willy the Wizard, where I don't think it's anything to do with Marvel. I think these are just standard jokey funs type stuff. And then an advert for next week where Spidey, is it next week? No. This is another one of the General Electric. You'll see, look, based on the Electric Company script by John Bonney. So this would have been in the States as an episode inside the Electric Company's TV show, all aimed at kids. Absolutely atrocious. And then you can buy these full colour summer specials that were going on. There'd be one for Spider-Man, one for Star Wars, one for Transformers, the A-Team, good old Doctor Who, and Masters of the Universe. And really, I'm just going to now just quickly step back to my other camera because my hand's going funny. There we go. And just explain a few things. That was a long way of just saying that UK comics were different. Marvel UK started in 1972. Marvel in America started about 1961, was it? 62? Because before it was Marvel, it was called Timely and Atlas. So during the 50s and so forth, Marvel was still around, but they were under another name. It wasn't until around about Fantastic Four issue number 1, which they considered to be the silver age of comics, not the golden age of comics. There wasn't really the Marvel comic as we know it. Roll on 10 years and Stan Lee has started to go, why are we only publishing in the States? Why are we not expanding into other territories? So he decided to do an experiment, and he chose Britain as one of those experiments. The idea was, let's get our comics reprinted over in the UK. We'll do it on as cheap as possible, but we'll do it weekly for the kids. And in that way, we can get our product out there. Now, if it takes off, we can start then creating British-based heroes. This happened in 1977, so it took from 1972 to 1977 for Marvel to generate its first British-born hero, which was not really imaginatively called Captain Britain, or Brian Braddock as he's alternatively known, Captain Britain. And he lasted a number of years before they cancelled him, brought him back, cancelled him, brought him back. But the idea was that if he took off, they could then produce a UK comic in America. And it would be a two-way street rather than all of the ideas and all of the reprinting coming from America. So you can imagine when I was showing you those comics that took you all the way to what, 1985, 86? Marvel Comics had been producing a weekly comic in that sort of format from 1972 up to 1986. Now, the last Spider-Man comic that I consider a Spider-Man comic in Britain was issue 666, and I do have that upstairs. What happened then is that Marvel was taken or sold to a company called Panini. When Panini took over, what they started to do was publish the comics in exactly the same format as the American formats, only they would staple 4 of those comics together in one book and call them the Complete series. So Spider-Man Complete, Fantastic Four Complete, Avengers Complete, because what was happening then was in America there were 4 Spider-Man comics. There was Amazing Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man, Web of Spider-Man, and Spider-Man Team Up. So there you are, 4 issues. You staple those together and you got the Complete Spider-Man. And it meant that you were keeping up as well with America. That's pretty much the experiment. And it worked to an extent. And while all that was going on, you could still buy the American comics that I showed you before. The difference with the American comics, though, back in 1972, there were no such thing as comic stores. You had to buy them from newsstands, and they were called newsstand editions. And although they had a British pence on the cover, they were printed in America and brought over on a boat. So they were ballast on boats basically. So if you had a boat that was bringing over whiskey, it would be ballasted with magazines and comics from America. Those would go to the newsagents to sell. That meant that you were not guaranteed every month to be able to get Spider-Man comic, which is why we didn't really have a comic industry in regards to buying the American ones until the hobbyist store opened, and that was about 1982, 83. And then that's when comics started to be shipped over here by plane. So that's the history that I just wanted to explain to you. I hope you found it quite interesting. I can go more and more and more in depth as we move forward. Oh, just bear with me. My comics are nearly falling over there. Just need a bit of a drink. And we go back to Kevin. Hopefully these questions aren't going to be all as lengthy as this one. But let me mute my microphone and we'll carry on with the lovely Down the Rabbit Hole.
Question 3. This is one I've asked Alan before and a few others. Simon Butler of Ocean Software, developer back in the day of a lot of great titles. I listened to him once on a podcast, and he had a very interesting point. He knows a lot of old games, but he's also developing some new ones, independent titles of his own. And there was somebody had asked him a question about, why don't you like people who are into retro games? And he said something that I thought, that's a weird perspective. I'm curious what you think, Del. He said, video games is like getting a crossword from the newspaper and filling in all the words, then getting an eraser and rubbing them all out, and then filling in the crossword again. He thought it was pointless. It's like, you've played that game. Why are you going back to it? And I was like, but, well... So, Del, what's your take on Simon Butler's unusual analogy there? Is it like just playing the same crossword puzzle over and over again?
Right, yes. That's a very interesting one. So, Simon Butler said that, did he? Now, I take it that was an interview at the end of something, and I can only put that down to a quip or something to say. I don't think it was well thought out. If you wanted to know, when I was dictaphoning this and I was answering the question the first time I watched this video, I said Shire Horse. Now, thinking back on why I said Shire Horse, if you think about what a Shire Horse is, it's a horse that's carrying something behind it, but it's got blinkers on. And if it's got blinkers on, it can only see the road ahead, which basically means it's concentrated on one thing, moving forward, and knows nothing else. My initial thought, therefore, Simon Butler, did you say his name was, is that he's probably a very great guy, and he probably just wanted to get rid of the person that was talking and saying about not liking retro people or people that play retro games. But if you look at life as only moving forward and not looking back, then you've got a pretty big ego, and you've got a lifestyle where you want to experience only new things all the time. He must have hated this reporter then, because reporters ask questions, and they ask questions on your past. You know, oh, can you tell me what you were thinking this? Can you say when you were writing the code for this? So he must hate all the time, is what I was thinking. I think that you need to have a happy balance between looking forward and looking back. And to be quite honest, even if it was the analogy, you did the crossword, you put all the answers in, you rubbed it out, and you did it again. That's what they call recall, and your brain needs recall to stay active. You need to have a component in your brain that recalls the past or information that you've seen before. And I'd be pretty hard pressed if you gave me a crossword and 5 years later gave me the same crossword for me to go, do I remember doing this one? So that's what all recall is all about. So I don't have a very respectful answer other than good for him that all he wants to do is look forward. But there are games out there that we love to play and play again, and there are games that we've never completed, and there are games where we missed something and we've now discovered it. And even, what was his name? Dr. Kawashima's brain training that used to be on the DS was the same puzzles over and over again because it's exercising the brain. After a while, you'd get the same questions coming up, but your brain is doing a different type of exercise. So as far as I'm concerned, it's a bit of a crappy answer from a highly intelligent guy. And I'm taken aback that he said it. I don't know what your thoughts were on this down the rabbit hole. I didn't look to see what Mainminster's answer was when you said that you've asked him for that. That's my analogy of it, that he's looking at life like with blinkers on. And I hope that's a good answer for you. So, good. A nice quick one for me to get through. So I'll just mute my mic and we'll move forward.
What do you think? Next question. You love movie media, as I mentioned, Blu-rays and DVDs and all that kind of stuff. Were you around? You were around as far as age is concerned, but were you into that in the Laserdisc era? Late 70s, early 80s. What were your thoughts about Laserdiscs? Do you have any commentary on what that whole era of physical media was like?
Yes. Laserdiscs. Yes. Now, I was around. You're quite right. You keep bringing up I'm old. But what I need to say about it is that my first blogs that I ever did way back in the day showed big box games that I still got. And the reason I was showing those big box games was to sort of like instruct my family that would be looking at these videos when I'm dead, or my nephews and nieces and so forth, on what I consider to be something that might be worth some money. They might not be, but at least they know that the big box games are old, and so therefore don't just chuck them away as old kit. They might be worth some money, something like that. But I also started to show some of my other media because I bought things on tape, on video CD, DVD, Blu-ray, and of course Ultra HD, which we have now, UHD. But I didn't skip Laserdiscs. I had a load of Laserdiscs. I still have my Laserdisc player, and I still have my Laserdiscs. The majority of them, okay, and some of them are here. So, just to give you a piece of excitement, here is a Laserdisc. In fact, actually, let's switch camera, shall we? Might be easier. And then you can see this. This is the widescreen collector's edition of Star Wars Trilogy, the definitive collection, which contains Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. This is on Laserdisc. And if I can get it out, I don't know if I can. Sorry, it's very stiff. You'll see what I mean. So you get this little booklet saying it's the definitive collection, and then you also get these big record size laser discs. There we go. This is Return of the Jedi, and if I pull this out, you'll see they are record size discs. Oh, lovely 20th Century Fox banding. Don't know if that's coming in focus. But there we are with the Laserdisc. So it was a record size CD. All lovely branded stuff. And if you wanted to know what the price of this was, bloody expensive. It was actually at the time £195 for all 3 films. And you got it in a deluxe packaging along with a George Lucas book, which I think you can see there, which is still unopened. Look, it's still got the foil wrap on it. George Lucas's book. And then you've got this pamphlet telling you all about the film Star Wars and so forth. So you've got Behind the Cinema, all about Star Wars, and then you've got all the chapter stops, because like a big CD you have chapters, and you also have audio commentary, and that was listed on the side there. So Ralph McQuarrie, Ken Rolston. Side 2, because you could turn the disc over, you've got the film plus audio commentary from George Lucas and Ralph again. And then you've got side 3, so that's disc 2. Some more audio commentary. And then the film, so that's side 4, so disc 2, side 4. More commentary by George Lucas. Disc 3, side 5, Prepare for Battle. Right, so we're getting very close to the end of the film. More audio commentary. And then you've got all the way up to the end of the film, which is chapter 41. Have a look. No, sorry, there we go. So at the end of 5, you've got the end of the film and theatrical trailers. And then side 6 is all the bonus material, supplementary material. So you've got war stories, original concepts, writing, aerial dogfights, C-3PO, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, the Star Wars gallery, droids, the Tatooine desert, etc., etc., etc. Behind the music, a tour of Lucasfilm's archive, plus points of interest. Encrypted in 21. So what does it say about 21? War stories, an interview with George Lucas. Encrypted from 19. What's that encrypted? No, it's my phone. Excerpted from 1992 and 1993 interviews, George Lucas describes the origins and development of story files, characters, and cast. Bloody hell. So, and then it just continues on and on and on. So if I move forward, look, you've now got The Empire Strikes Back, and it's the film, and so forth and so forth and so forth. Now, just before you go any further, these are the non-special editions. These are the original trilogy, the trilogy that we saw in the pictures in 1977, 1980, and what was it, 82, for Return of the Jedi. And therefore I will never probably get rid of this collection. It's just one of those things where it's just a part of my history of film, and I've got no end like this. I've got an Alien special editions, Aliens special edition, Toy Story, all around that era. So I'm just going to switch back to camera only now while I put all this away, and just sort of like explain why I showed you all of that. I know that you're a big Star Wars fan, so I thought you'd get a kick because you've got the DVD of this, and I believe it's the same transfer. So by me reading out all of those chapter stops, you might see whether you've got all the extras. If you haven't got all the extras, it might well be that they were on later releases, because this was the definitive collection at the time. In fact, you might have all of this material, but you might also have more, which means that you've got more than I've got, because, you know, basically this is hard to get now, this Star Wars trilogy, the original trilogy. And so basically I thought you'd get a kick. Now, laser discs I had from 1990 till around about 95, 96. and I loved it. Um, I'd started to buy widescreen TVs. I'd got my first surround sound amp. I'd been at work for a couple of years, so I was earning my own money. I was working for Lloyd's Bank now. So I tended to find that I had that little bit extra cash. Um, and that's what I put my money into. It was film. It was being able to see in its correct ratio a film like Star Wars, just like it was at the projector, on a widescreen TV in THX sound. And when it came to broadcasts on TV, it would have been Nikam stereo, the ground-based stereo system, broadcast system. So I then started to move into watching stuff on satellite, because I moved from normal terrestrial TV to having a squarial disc, because I had a British British satellite broadcasting dish, which was then taken over by Sky, and it became British Sky Broadcasting. So all of that was going on in my life, and along with me moving through my Amigas into consoles and then into PCs. This is all the 90s. So things were moving at pretty fast rate. And to keep up with my soundtrack collection, my film collection, my comic collection, I tended to find I was pretty broke at the end of every month. But that's enough about me. We're going to mute the mic now. We're going to move forward with the questions, but I hope you got a kick out of that. So that's brilliant.
And here's another one that is also one that you've talked about. Physical media versions, 4K Blu-rays of shows. Star Trek The Motion Picture Director's Cut 4K, or Director's Edition 4K. The new one that came out. You love it. I don't have a 4K player, or TV, so I haven't really got into that one yet. I have watched the ever-living heck out of Star Trek The Motion Picture over the many years, or back in the theaters originally. What's your favorite version prior to the 4K Director's Edition release? Because there are very interesting twists and turns to what the theatrical original had, what the TV version did, what the Director's Edition on DVD about 15, 20 years ago came out. I got that. Which one is your favorite and why?
Yay. Okay. Yes, he knows me well. Star Trek, the motion picture, or as some fans call it, the motionless picture, because they thought it was a bit boring and slow. That's what he's talking about. I've got obviously the 4K UHD edition of the motion picture, the director's edition. It comes in lots and lots of discs. There are various different formats on here. They wanted this to be the last time they brought out the motion picture, unless we move forward into 8K and 3D and all that sort of stuff again, by combining all of the old versions. So, lovely. Which is my favourite. Now, you have to understand a little bit about how the motion picture came out, but it wasn't finished when they actually brought out the theatrical cut for us to watch. In fact, the prints were still wet when it was being shown for the first night across the whole of America. That meant that the special effects were not completed, and therefore it went out as an unfinished product, but good enough to say you've got a finished movie. And that must be terrible for the director, Bob Wise, by the way, because this man, who's an Oscar-winning director, who's brought out West Side Story, was it the Day the Earth Stood Still, which is a favourite of mine, and many other films, has got a film out there that he couldn't complete, all because Paramount pushed and pushed and pushed and said the date cannot be changed, which was a week and a half before Christmas, so they needed it out there for the Christmas audience. It made its money. I watched it. I was only still just double digits, so I was in, you can imagine, I'm talking I was 10, 11, 12 when that film came out. And I loved it because as a kid I didn't see the issues with it. I'm sure adults did. They all turned around and said, "What's this? Why is it like this? Why is Spock talking like this? Why is Kirk acting like this?" Etc. 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 And I'm sure that was a very exciting time and no internet. So, you know, but the film that you talked about a little bit later on was the TV version that only happened in the States, and I think it was on NBC. It was the movie of the week, and what they'd done is they'd found footage that was on the cutting room floor and embedded it into the film as a sort of like extended cut. But what they didn't realise was those cuts are on the floor for the right reason, because there was no special effects in them. So you were putting in unfinished cuts of film into a finished film. So you saw things like the set lights and so forth on the sides of the picture and so forth. There's a scene where Kirk is coming outside the Enterprise to chase after Spock in a certain part of the film, and you can see he's on a plinth. He's not standing on top of the Enterprise and then shifting out into space. He's on a plinth. You can see he's on a plinth. You can see the cameras and the staff and the crew from the film set all around him. It's an interesting one because obviously there was certain stuff that was completed. There was whole dialogue that was there. I remember there was a scene on the Enterprise bridge, and the crew were turning around and saying, "What about the commander who's not going to be captain anymore?" And Uhura would turn around and say, "Our chance of actually coming back have now trebled." So basically all of that does add to the film a little bit, because it shows the emphasis that you've got a better chance of winning now that Kirk's captain. I can tell you that now. It's all very good, but the one that comes to mind to me, the one that I got the most excitement for, and it's my naivety here, was they went to Bob Wise and said, "How about finishing this film? And because we're now 20 years down the road, we're going to complete those special effects. In fact, we're going to go back to the old special effects and we're going to renew those special effects. So you're going to have a film that looks like it was made last week, and you're going to have your finished product and all of your ideas brought in. Are you on board?" And of course he went, "Yeah." And they did all those special effects, and it was issued out on DVD only. I was so excited that I ordered the NTSC version of the discs and had them shipped over, and I had a multi-system DVD player so I could play it, and that was my version of the film for many years. And the only difficulty is even though we've gone through Blu-ray and we've gone through now to UHD, they could never really do that particular cut of the film any justice, because all the special effects that they did for the DVD copy were too low res for you to put into high definition or for a theatrical cut. So the only way that you could have this film now on Blu-ray or Ultra HD was to go back to that print again and do the special effects from scratch. So Paramount released a note to the world to say, "We're going to start a new TV channel. We're going to call it Paramount Plus. We're going to go back to the motion picture, and we're going to do all these new special effects, and we're going to relaunch the motion picture in the theatres as a one-off for people to see it in the cinema for one last time with these special effects. You'll be hearing the sound in the cinema. You'll have that lovely score by Jerry Goldsmith, etc., etc., in the theatre." And a week later, you'll see it on the new Paramount Plus channel, along with new series called Strange New Worlds. And that was last year. And they put that cut in that box set, so I've now got 4 cuts of the film. And you're asking me which one do I like the best? Well, at the moment, you have to look at it and go, the 4th one is going to be the one that you think I might actually go for. But Bob Wise has been dead. He had no instructions in regards to wanting to go back to any other version other than the one that he asked to do on DVD. The good news about it is, though, it's pretty much identical. Obviously, there is license on the special effects where they show you a different shot of something. But when it comes to the script and the vocabulary in it, it's the same film. So I'm going to say the latest one is great. This is all different to Star Wars, where there are special editions of that and there are original versions of that. What you got to remember is, with the motion picture, you only ever had the original motion picture on Blu-ray with no new special effects, because they couldn't do it. And it's the same with Ultra HD. So all the kiddies that have grown up watching Star Trek the motion picture have watched the old versions. So it's nice to see something new. In 20 years' time, I'm pretty sure we'll be sick to the death of seeing the new version, and you can't, for love nor money, get the old version. So I'm going to go with either the DVD version or the new version as my favourite. And the TV version that used to be one of my favourites is the weakest of the versions because of the optical effects not completed. So we'll go back to questions now. My God, I hope we're going to get through this quite quickly now. Just bear with me.
Here's a little bit of a divisive one. To switch gear from Star Trek to Star Wars, I know you're very much into The Mandalorian. I'm currently watching the 3rd season here myself. The end of Season 2, and this is a spoiler. If anybody hasn't watched Mandalorian Season 2, I'm about to wreck something that, I think it's been a year or so, people have talked the heck out of this. But be prepared. I'm going to spoil the end of Season 2 here. Run away. There is a sequence where our heroes are in trouble and these stormtrooper droids are bashing down the door, and we're all like, oh no, how are they going to get out of this? Nothing they can do will save them. And then an X-Wing pulls into the hangar and a cloaked figure comes out, wastes all the droids with his green lightsaber, only to pull off his cloak and reveal it's Luke Skywalker. Digitized young version CGI'd Mark Hamill to make him look like he did circa Return of the Jedi era. Many people love that ending of that season. I don't. And to me, it's because it was Deus Ex Machina. Like, that is the first thing you learn in storytelling, is don't use Deus Ex Machina. It is a bad trope. It is a bad way to do a show or a story. So when I saw that, I was like, well, that's a lot of fan service, and that's not a good story beat. But apparently everybody disagrees with me and says that was the best episode of The Mandalorian ever. And grown-up fans I've seen on YouTube moved to tears by that sequence. So, Del, what did you think of that ending to Season 2 of The Mandalorian?
To say you and I are on the same page is unbelievable, really, when you think about it. But I thought it was a terrible story. It is exactly as you said, fan service. It is what wow factor can we do at the end of a season that will draw people back and want there to be a 3rd season. So it's very easy to look back at the history of something and go, I know, we'll bring back something that the fans would all love, and that's going to be, let's bring back Luke Skywalker. But I'd never heard of it called a Deus Ex Machina writing, but I've seen it all my life through science fiction TV shows. It's fan service, it makes you smile, but it usually ends up being the worst story that you'll ever read or watch. To give you an example, in Star Trek The Next Generation, at the end of the third season, there is a story called The Best of Both Worlds. And there is basically there is a cliffhanger, and it's where the captain is captured by the Borg. He's turned into one of the Borg, and he uses memory recall to scare the ship into thinking that they've got no chance by mentioning the name of one of the bridge crew. In other words, you've got no chance, have you, number one? Something like along those lines. And then it makes you want to, you're going to have to wait 6 months before you can see the next one, and you lead into the next season. The trouble is, the expectations then for the audience is the fourth season going to be equally as good? And then what are we going to do at the end of the fourth season? Now, I can't quite remember what the cliffhanger was at the end of the fourth season, but let me see if I can get... There's low light now, unfortunately. It's getting quite dark in my room. See if that does it. There we go. But the cliffhangers got weaker and weaker and weaker. Now, if I remember rightly, the next one was they brought back an old person from Star Trek history called Tasha Yar, but the twist was she's now a Romulan. She died in the first season, but they brought her back in a mid-season episode of the third season where there was a time-traveling story, and at the end of that particular season for 4, she's now a Romulan because she survived and mated with a Romulan, and therefore her spouse, her daughter that she gave birth to, is a Romulan. All scares because anybody then who sees her face knows it's Tasha Yar, right? Fan service. Terrible. What was the next one? I think they brought Spock back. Oh, what else could you do? Let's see. We'll go back to the original TV series. We'll tell a story about Spock's father dying, and that right at the end you'll see Spock there looking like he's going to commit some sort of like criminal offence which will cause a battle between two factions. And it gets worse and worse and worse. It weakens and weakens. I think other stories that I saw were Data had a brother called Law. They brought Law back after about 3 seasons, and he was then going to try and take over the Federation with a load of robots or something. It just goes on and on and on, and each time the fan service is you're seeing an old character brought back. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's a 5-second shock in a story that's weak. And there's nothing to make you glue to see the good story, where the best of both worlds, where there wasn't that type of thing, had a great cliffhanger with quite a nice conclusion. And the 6-month wait was highly anticipated, and you still had a good season. You had a good season of episodes. So I'm with you. Bad story writing, fan service, not great. But saying that, The Mandalorian as a whole has not done that, I have to say, through every single episode. There has been some fan service, but on the whole it's been pretty good writing, and I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt until I see a lot more. If they do the same thing at the end of season 3 with some sort of shock of bringing a character out of mothballs, like Princess Leia or something, then they're not learning anything from story writing of the past. And we'll go to the next one. Yes, let's move on.
Another Star Wars question here. Generations have grown up knowing only Star Wars the Special Edition. That, to some people, is the most accessible version. That's what's on Disney Plus. That's what you can get on Blu-ray, etc., etc. The original theatrical cut is not impossible to get your hands on, but you got to jump through a few hoops or get one obscure DVD release, which I happen to have, and has the original cut on it, warts and all. Some of these viewers, I've watched them on YouTube, or these 20-somethings have done videos about, everybody goes on about the original theatrical cut being so much better than the special edition. I've watched it. Honestly, I think the special edition is better. What do you think, Del? What's your take on the original theatrical cut from not colored by our sort of nostalgic connection to it, but do you understand that a generation now thinks that the special edition is better than the original theatrical cut? I'll be curious to hear what you think.
Right. Well, I'm glad I did that big section on Star Wars now, so I could probably cut to the chase. I'm not too bad at accepting remasters because I do know that they're doing it for a new generation. I've got the benefit of being able to have gone to the cinema and saw the original and then seen the remasters. And I get totally excited sometimes, like when there's a plan for the Star Trek, the original series, to be reshot for all the special optical effects, but keeping the original negatives and masters for all of the normal shots, that you see on the bridge and all of that sort of stuff, as long as it's not jarring and disjointed. So I have to accept now that those special editions that came out around about the time just before the Phantom Menace, that's now the accepted version. And people don't, unless you're of a certain age, remember what the original films are. I prefer the original because that's what I'm used to. It's the one I see less and less of, so I get excited about going back and seeing the original. But is the new one a bad one? No. I wish they'd get a good 4K release of it, because they've put too much dynamic noise reduction and all sorts of stuff that make things look waxy, and it's really still not the definitive edition. But I think things should look like this. As long as you've got the original negative and you've got it preserved and you can actually bring that out for a certain audience that wants it, do so, as well as producing and bringing out the new version, so you can choose. If you can choose, great. These are films now that are complete, finished, got all their money in from the box office. So as far as I'm concerned, now give it to the public and give it to them in the versions that are both out there, and let us choose which one is the one that we prefer. Hope that's a good answer. Let's move forward.
Here's another one that I have asked somebody else, I'm sure, or I was planning to. We're less today, but a couple of years ago, the whole DLC freemium pay-to-win model for a lot of gaming was really, really prevalent. I think it's still there. I know Fortnite, for example, is huge, and Overwatch and all that kind of stuff. Get it for free, pay for all the DLC or all the extras, and in some cases, it can be pay to win. It's just not something that I like. I don't support that business model. I don't like it. Give me the game, let me buy it, and then I get everything. But I'm also of the arcade generation where we walked to a venue, plunked a quarter in, or in your case 10p, I suppose, and played a game, and then to keep playing the game, you had to put in another coin. How is that different from the freemium model? There are those who would argue, hey, you're not in any position to argue. Your generation had to keep putting money into a game in order to keep playing it. Why is that any different from Fortnite? What do you think, Del? I'm curious to your perspective.
Yes. Like you, I hate that business model, Fortnite. It is gambling. I do not like pay to win. But if we're talking about DLC, the model that I don't like when it comes to DLC is the model where they give you the full game. There are no patches. There are no extra bits that is going to be downloaded for you in what they call DLC. You pay for something and they unlock something that's already in the game. So in other words, it had already been developed, it had already been paid for, the programmers had all been paid for it as well, and it was just locked behind a code. That code was given to you when you bought the extra bit and gives you it as part of a story. That's wrong, because if you've paid 60 odd quid and it's already in the game and there's no development extra on top of it, then you should have it for free. If there is a model where there is a game, and Spider-Man is one of those, where they did the game, but then they went to the original programmers and said, can you program this side story? And it's going to be a patch that we'll apply later on that is called DLC, and we're going to offer it as a side story and say to people, you do not need to have this if you don't want it, and we're going to price it accordingly, $3 or $4, £5, whatever, and give it as a extra on top of the story. Then I'm for that, because they actually designed that outside of scope of the original product, and it's to elongate the story and give fan service. Guild Wars to me is a perfect example of a model that sort of works, because that's an open, massively multiplayer online role-playing game that you buy the game once, so you've got the game, and then you can buy things that you want cosmetically if you wish, but they do nothing in the game. And what you can buy is from other people that have constructed or crafted extra weapons and so forth. It's up to you if you want that, but you can craft it yourself if you grind. That works. What I don't like is, like you say, the business model where you're paying for loot crates and all of this sort of stuff. It's encouraging our kids and youngsters to buy a game and know that you can win because you've got more money than the next door neighbour who hasn't got the money. So basically they languish in the bad area, and you continue to move forward because your credit card is of a higher value. I don't like that at all. So I hope that's answered that.
And on the last question, the big one about perspective. The producer of Final Fantasy, and I'm going to butcher this name, Naoki Yoshida, I hope. He doesn't like, he recently did an interview and he said he doesn't like the term JRPG. It is something that's been around for 30 odd years. We've talked about Final Fantasy and various others as being JRPGs, Japanese role-playing games. He thinks, because in Japan they're just called role-playing games. Why has it got this J moniker? Why are you sort of nailing it to one region of the world? That's kind of negative. It has a negative connotation, and why are you pegging it to Japan specifically? And I watched a YouTube video, and the host on that had a really interesting point, because they were from the UK, and they said, if you think about it, back in like the late 80s, when you had a lot of stuff coming out for the Commodore 64, basically any of the stuff that Alan Stewart's playing on his streams, like any of those, China Miners or what's the Eggy one? Tell me, what's the name of that Eggy character? Oh, this guy here. Anyway, those games, those are kind of very British. There's a very British style to those games in that era. But we don't call them Brit action games or BA games, British action games. I thought it was a very interesting perspective of, if this guy is sort of arguing against using the term JRPG, why did we not similarly address British style games, especially in the Commodore 64, BBC Micro, Sinclair ZX Spectrum days? Why were those games, which are very clearly British, and I've played a few of them, why did we never attach a British moniker to them? And do you have any thoughts or opinions or questions about that? So, what do you think, Del? I'm curious. As a Brit player of that era, what did you think?
Now, hopefully I've not forgot to unhook the microphone or something like this, because I haven't been looking very closely. But that one interests me and intrigues me a little bit. So I have heard of JRPG, and it amuses me that we keep moving forward with trying to pigeonhole games into certain genres: run and gun, shoot 'em up, platform, adventure, text adventure, move and click, blah 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 blah. And the role-playing area of gaming is splitting and fractured even more. And I can only imagine that I can put a real world thing on this, and that's in regards to styles and rules. Yes. So when it comes to cartoon in the eastern area, they can call it manga, a certain style of animation, the way it's drawn and the way it is, and then how we do a role-playing game to how they do their role-playing games. Role-playing games are done by a set of rules. I can only imagine that when Japanese role-playing games come out, they are very much seen as being out of their country with their own rule set, with their own style and storytelling, which therefore has to be adapted for Western audiences. You don't have a rule set for arcade games. You don't have something that says a platform game, you roll the dice and it does this. So it's not that type of rule set. And I think that when it comes to arcade games, on home systems, Commodore 64s, Amigas, and so forth, where they were big in Europe and America and those sort of countries, we'd already accepted the type of language that we use, which is platform, shoot 'em up, bullet hell, etc., etc., etc. So we're happy to pigeonhole those types of games into those, but we don't call them like in our music industry, we don't call it Britpop, so we don't call it Brit gaming and American gaming and German gaming, because we just put those into the standardized pot of gaming. I think you can see when you're playing a game the influences if the game came from Germany, or if it came from the States, or if it came from Britain, especially Britain, because I think it's a little bit more Monty Python-ish and quirky. So I have the opinion that we all love to pigeonhole, but when it comes to role-playing games, it's fractured because it's not only a style, but it's also a rule set. And when we're writing games for the just standard audience, then it doesn't really go by a rule set. It's not. Even its graphic design is not. You can see it's totally British. There isn't anything other than certain symbols that you might see in games in the corner that make that a British game. And I hope that's a good enough answer, because that's the only one I've got. And what an interesting question, because yes, I only really got into JRPG with Final Fantasy and Skies of Arcadia. And I believe when you think about how Zelda was constructed, that wasn't considered a JRPG, just a role-playing game that was for all audiences, not only Japanese and Chinese, but also Western audience. I know they had to do their conversion, but the story was written from the ground up for all audiences. I think that's the case with Lynx. And we'll end up now, so we'll go back to Media Player.
So I believe that's it. Yes, so there's 10 different questions. I'm going to write them all down below so that you can read them a little more coherently than my rambling. But yeah, anybody who else wants to answer or have an opinion on it, please feel free. I love discussing these things and sending these questions out. And again, if you're interested in another variation on the Friday Waffle, where you just hear somebody talking to you directly, Delboy3k1 is on board that stuff, and I like his channel and I recommend him, so I'm going to give Delboy a shout out. Please go check him out, and I look forward to seeing what answers he has to these questions. Okay, well, Spidey and I are going to take off now, so until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.
Oh, wow, and we come to the end and it's getting very, very dark and I'm starting to get very, very tired. But thank you so much for doing that for me down the rabbit hole. that was fun, and I hope I gave good answers and constructive answers for you. I'm so jealous that you've got Spidey as your pal. Unfortunately, he's part of American culture and not British culture, just to give you that other little edge that you can talk about later on. I hope I can do something like this for you in the future. And I hope I can do it for anybody else that would like me to. But with that, I'm going to say it's getting very dark, and I do apologise that I'm ending quickly. But please, please support everybody out there that you watch. Definitely go and see Down the Rabbit Hole. Fun stuff, whiskey drinking, parodies of movies, game reviews on Vectrex, on cartridge, new hardware. It's just, it blows my channel apart, take it like this, with my simple little blog. And with that, I'm going to say salute. I hope you found this enjoyable, and bye bye.